Ah, two little orphan boys who don't know they coming into all that money. And they sure need somebody of their own kind to take care of them and that money. And I votes for me.
What you talking about?
Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series.
Welcome to the Season 2 premiere of Battle of the Network shows. And today we're talking about Diff'rent Strokes. Rick?
Yeah, this series was suggested to us by a listener, actually, and not just any listener, though. He's a longtime listener and friend of the show, Jim McDivitt, and I'm especially thankful that he listens to and appreciates what we're doing here, because I've known Jim for a long time. He's been a great friend and a great guy, and I'd say he has a good appreciation of what one might call higher culture, shall we say, and maybe more popular culture. You know, he's done lots of writing over the years. I've read DVD reviews that he's done writing about TV shows, including some shows that we may have covered and may have yet to cover on the podcast. First, I want to thank Jim for suggesting Diff'rent Strokes. I think it's a great idea to talk about. And I also want to mention that he and his co-author, Eric San Juan, have written a couple of great books about Alfred Hitchcock, and there's been a lot of stuff written about Alfred Hitchcock, but these guys came up with new ways to talk about Alfred Hitchcock, make it incredibly insightful with a lot of information, but also entertaining and fresh perspectives on, you know, one of the icons of filmmaking, and that's easier said than done. But I just want to mention the two books that they have right now, and you can look them up. They have a web presence. I know they got a Facebook page going. They did have a podcast a while back, and those are great to go back and listen to if you want. But we recommend these books: A Year of Hitchcock, 52 Weeks with the Master of Suspense, which is kind of a chronological look through the entire filmography of Alfred Hitchcock. Their follow-up to that was Hitchcock's Villains, Murderers, Maniacs, and Mother Issues, which is a great title there. And highly recommend those, and they're both available in Kindle, probably wherever books are sold. I know the first one came out on a relatively smaller press, but and the hardback was a little expensive at first, but there's a softcover version of that one out right now, but they are also both available on Kindle. So thanks again, Jim, and everybody listening. If you're at all into Hitchcock, check out the work these guys have done on these books. They did a good job, and again, Jim recommended this, so let's talk about Diff'rent Strokes.
Diff'rent Stroke, kind of an iconic series from the late 70s and early 80s. Most people who grew up in that period and later certainly know Arnold Drummond, played by Gary Coleman, and probably the other characters. Willis, Mr. Drummond.
Yeah, the memorable characters of
Mrs. Garrett.
Yeah.
Kimberly. That was the name that
Kimberly,
had a block on. Dana Plato's Kimberly, and Todd Bridges as Willis. Conrad Bain as Mr. Drummond, or Phil, or Philip, or Drummond.
Yeah.
A lot of people call him Drummond.
Yeah.
Including at least where I watched it, the episode descriptions referred to him as Drummond.
That seems a little coarse.
Yeah.
A little disrespectful.
Right. The series about Conrad Bain. Mr. Drummond is the head of a company called Trans International Limited. He lives on Park Avenue in a penthouse, and he has a daughter, Kimberly. I believe he's a widower. Mrs. Garrett is his housekeeper. In the past, he had another housekeeper who was the mother of Arnold and Willis, and both she and their father passed away, and Mr. Drummond has taken them in with plans on adopting him.
Yes, he promised to take care of them.
Yeah.
He had promised that he would always look out for them, and
right,
he sure does.
And so they moved from a tough life in Harlem to a penthouse. Not a penthouse in the sky.
Yeah, no.
It's a different show.
But they did have nothing but the jeans when
That's
they started.
Right. Yeah, and if you take the opening credits as a literal retelling of them coming to live with Mr. Drummond, he just drives to Harlem in his limo and picks him up off a basketball court and takes him home.
Yeah, you wouldn't know that he had a relationship with them, let alone with their mother, let alone with them.
Right.
It looks like he's going shopping for kids to adopt.
Yeah.
Like, oh, stop over there, limo driver stops and
Right.
picks up 2 kids that leave their pickup basketball game and go into an older white man's car.
That's right.
Without questions.
Well, it's a limo. And, of course, you get another, much like The Facts of Life, you get a classic theme song, lyrics by the recently departed Alan Thicke. Mm-hmm. I believe he's singing this one, too, right?
I didn't think he was. I don't think he's singing it.
Sounds a little bit like him, but...
Well, I might have to do some research on that, but
yeah.
I don't believe he is.
But I believe it's the same team that wrote The Facts of Life. The same 3 people.
Yeah, the Al Burton and Gloria Loring. Thicke.
Yeah,
yes.
and it kind of tells the story of what's going on too, of the show, the nothing but their jeans line. And
right.
It starts out being about Mr. Drummond, or a rich man.
Yes, and it gets a little philosophical. Covers the philosophical underpinnings of the show. The world don't move to the beat of just one drum.
No, it takes different strokes.
Yeah, I mean that's telling you right there. It's telling you you're going to get some social commentary with your comedy, folks. You're going to learn about your foibles. And speaking of social commentary and foibles, this was actually part of Norman Lear's TV production company. Although Norman Lear didn't have any direct involvement in this show, like his Embassy Television. Or
right.
Actually, it was what became
Tandem.
Yes, what became Embassy. I was trying to learn the production history of Tandem production. It's very complicated how it went. It was like Norman Lear and Bud Yorkin, then this Tandem thing, and then Tandem eventually gets swallowed up and all this. But Norman Lear was indirectly involved with this show.
Right. So it has a lot of the elements that you would expect.
Yes.
Including Conrad Bain was on Maude, a famous Norman Lear show.
Yeah, that was his breakthrough. He was Arthur, who was like the token conservative who Maude would often clash with, which is interesting because he's, on Diff'rent Strokes, he's pretty much the epitome of the well-meaning sort of white guilt liberal on Diff'rent Strokes, I would say. So it was quite a turn to go from playing that character to this one, where he's pretty much just a kindly, always well-meaning, but definitely was born with a silver spoon in his mouth and has a snobbish mother and all this, and definitely that blue blood background. Yeah, and Diff'rent Strokes was on NBC.
Yeah, it's from the same. We keep coming back to this particular period of NBC. I think Facts of Life and Chips, or at least the episodes we looked at, Diff'rent Strokes, and another show we're going to be talking about this season, all from this period where NBC was kind of in the tank.
Yeah, yet we keep coming back to this period where we talk about.
And Diff'rent Strokes was like the big hit.
It was again
for them.
Yeah, even relatively like. Diff'rent Strokes. It was, but it actually didn't do quite as well as I thought when I looked this up. As a matter of fact, its only top 20 finish was in I think it was the third season, I think, when it was tied for 17th in like the 1980-1981 season. That was the only time it was in the top 20.
Okay.
So it was on NBC for 7 years, I think, and then it got canceled and then moved to ABC for its 8th and final season. And boy, it was run on fumes at that point.
Yeah. Sam.
Yeah.
Gary Coleman got too old.
Yeah, it pulled out all the tricks.
Yeah.
Brought on a cute kid.
Right.
It brought in, a new love interest and wife for Mr. Drummond. Then it replaced her, brought in another actress.
Yeah.
So we went through, it was Dixie Carter, and then Marianne Mobley replaced Dixie Ann Carter. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of different strokes that went on through the years. Kimberly was gone from the show for a while.
Yeah. At some point they didn't have housekeepers anymore.
Yeah.
And they went through 3 of those.
Yeah.
Of course, Mrs. Garrett had to go on to her own show. So
now, fortunately, it wasn't like Night Court where the bailiffs kept dying on them. It was just people leaving on their own volition, I believe.
Right. In fact, I think 2 of them are still alive.
I don't think Adelaide is still with us. But she
lived a long life.
Yes. Mrs. Garrett and your favorite, Pearl.
Why do you keep thinking Pearl's my favorite?
I don't know.
I think she's my least favorite.
Okay, sorry. Mary Jo Catlett, I believe, was her name.
Yeah. Nothing against you, Mary Jo.
Yeah.
Just I was more Mrs. Garrett. Yeah, a lot of socially relevant shows. Some of them kind of infamous. A lot of heavy stuff happened in this family. Not just deaths of parents, but kidnappings and things we're not going to talk about on this. I don't
Yeah,
think.
it became known for like the very special episodes, and we actually this episode that we're going to talk about had some sentimentality, but it's not one of those very special episodes. So
No.
I don't want to disappoint anybody. I know a lot of other people have talked about the very special episodes, like
The Gordon
the
jump.
Gordon Jump, the Bicycle Man episode. That's infamous, and
Right.
I think it's probably been done elsewhere. Yeah. So, although and actually, I think when I was looking into this, it looked like I watched this a lot. First, I'll say when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Going back and looking at it now, it looks like a lot of the very special episodes, they really amped up about halfway through the show's run. Mm-hmm. And I think that season 5 had the Gordon Jump episode, the Nancy Reagan Just Say No to Drugs episode. That's not actually available on DVD yet.
Huh.
That is coming out this spring.
This season, yeah.
Yeah, the season 5 on
Right.
DVD. So the whole show isn't out on DVD, but about like half of it is.
Yeah.
And season 5 also had an interesting episode that I vaguely remembered and forgotten about, where Kimberly is sexually harassed at work.
Uh-huh.
And then the guy, the boss apologizes to her, but then when he finds out that she's, that her dad is loaded, he starts becoming romantically involved with her, and he's basically in a relationship with her just to get to her money. Yeah. So
Very convoluted.
it just seems like the weird way to address a serious issue.
Yeah.
So they kind of combine gold digging and with sexual harassment, which
Right.
seems to cheapen the issue a little bit. So
Yeah.
when season 5 comes out, that's when I'm going to want to be interested in seeing. But we went much earlier in the show's run.
Right. And of course, it's famous for Gary or Arnold's catchphrase, "What you talking about?" Which seems, when you read it on the internet, at least, they really go all out in spelling it.
Yeah, they try to.
What chew, like CHU, talking about. I don't know that I would do that myself.
Right.
And it could be, Willis, I guess, is the default version, but lots of other ones. Now, I'll go ahead and bring this up. I once had not an argument, but a discussion with a friend that about Willis's supposed catchphrase.
Willis's catchphrase?
Yeah, see, this is, and the Wikipedia, granted it's Wikipedia, maybe my friend wrote this entry, I doubt it.
He rigged it.
His name is Jim, too, but let's say what as his catchphrase. And I do remember him saying that a lot, but I don't feel like if you're saying something that people just say.
Yeah, that's like, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
That's not so much.
No.
Say what? I don't remember that.
Yeah.
I'm
And he says it once in one of these episodes.
more like, come on, Arnold.
Yeah.
I don't.
It's just, to me, that doesn't qualify as a catchphrase.
Well, it doesn't to me either. But if Wikipedia says it, who am I to argue with Wikipedia?
Well,
Let alone your friend Jim.
yeah. I don't know. I still, I don't think it is.
Well, that does bring up an interesting point, though. Is Gary Coleman quickly became the star of the show, obviously, and
Yeah.
Willis was really overshadowed by Arnold throughout the whole
Right.
run.
Despite getting to date Janet Jackson.
Yeah. Yeah, and another thing, just to touch base on this, all the kids had troubled lives, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Dana Plato's, is no longer with us.
Yeah.
Todd Bridges, amazingly, is still with us, but he's had a long and checkered career.
Yeah. Gary Coleman's passed away.
Gary Coleman, died, I think he was 42
Of course, he had a lot of health issues.
when he died, yes. And his diminutive stature was, I guess, partially caused by, he had a kidney condition, a condition that affected his kidneys, stunted his growth. So he had health issues throughout his whole life, really.
Right. But Conrad Bain and Charlotte Ray lived long lives.
Yeah, Charlotte Ray, Mrs. Garrett, and Conrad Bain, yeah. So if there was a curse, it didn't affect the adults, let's say
That's
that.
right.
And I don't know what caused that. There's been speculation. There's been cheesy TV movies about different strokes, but I don't think it was a situation where the adults were causing problems for the young kids in this particular set. So should we talk about this particular episode and then kind of get into some of these big picture issues later?
Yeah.
This one we decided to watch for the podcast was The Adoption, a two-parter that aired 9 o'clock on NBC, which I was kind of surprised. The show moved around time slots, but at this time it was on at 9 p.m.
Seems a little late.
It does. I thought of it as an 8 o'clock, classic 8 o'clock family show.
Yeah.
But NBC was trying different things at this time. But it aired October 31st, 1979, and then part 2 is November 7th, 1979. So this is early in the second season, because Diff'rent Strokes premiered the year before. And should we just give a summary? There's a special guest star in this episode.
Very special guest.
One of our favorites, Whitman Mayo.
The great.
Yes, I apologize. The great Whitman Mayo, a.k.a. Grady.
Yeah.
And the episode begins as it's interesting that the family is excited because it's finally time to officially adopt, for Mr. Drummond to officially adopt his kids.
Yeah.
And the kids are kind of coming to terms with that. They're excited about it. Mr. Drummond is overjoyed with it. Even Mrs. Garrett's overjoyed. And Kimberly, who I've noticed is very enthusiastic and very bubbly in these early episodes. She's, thrilled to have them officially be her, her real brothers.
Right.
Now, there becomes, though, a fly in the ointment, though, when Whitman Mayo is playing, interestingly, a quote-unquote antique stealer, self-described antique stealer, but actually a junk man.
In L.A.
Yeah, in L.A. And he has an interaction at the beginning of when we first see him with another special guest star, Stymie from the Little Rascals.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the guy with the hat was Stymie, who was in the Little Rascals, was replaced by Buckwheat, and then got into hard drugs, I believe, for years. And before kind of appearing on shows like Good Times, he was on many Good Times episodes, and then he made this little cameo here in this episode.
Wow.
Of the adoption. Yeah, so
Gonna have to watch that scene again.
So Whitman Mayo finds the old will by someone that was leaving the fortune. Said he was leaving his fortune to Arnold and Willis's father.
Right.
And if in the event that the father was dead, the fortune would go to the mother.
Yeah.
So.
And if the event she was dead, it would go to the kids. I think it mentioned the kids.
Yes,
Yeah.
it does. It does specifically just say that.
He found this in a mattress.
Yes, and he's Jethro Simpson.
Right.
So he's not the lovable Grady that we know from Sanford and Son. He's definitely a conniver in this one.
He is.
So Jethro, sees some dollar signs and does a little research, makes a few phone calls, and figures out that the parents are dead, and he's got to go.
Yeah.
Try to get the money from the kids, essentially. So, and he shows up right as they're, almost literally, I guess, right as they're about to go to the courthouse, right, and sign the adoption papers, and the judge is going to make it official and everything. The social worker's giving them the final okay, and everybody's happy. And then Jethro comes in, finds out that that they're in this situation, that they're about to be adopted, and comes back with a lawyer of his own and forges a letter allegedly from their father, and he basically is putting claim into guardianship for the kids as their cousin. He passes himself off as their cousin. He says he's been in Brazil.
Right.
He makes up all these stories to try to ingratiate himself into their lives, even though he clearly has no idea who they are or what their background is. And, they don't really know. They're suspicious. Everybody's a little confused by it. And actually, they're quite upset by this move. Mrs. Garrett says that he's tearing the family apart.
Yeah.
And it looks pretty rough for a while. Yeah, because Mr. Drummond's lawyer even says, well, families might get priority, and they also bring up the specter of interracial, adoptions, and how if a family makes a claim, especially in this case, the judge might kind of give credence to a family member. So there's a lot going on. Mr. Drummond actually says he won't stop fighting, but he might have to, kind of see how this plays out, and it might take a while to get them. And it's kind of a dramatic moment, and it's so dramatic actually that we see it to be continued.
To be continued next week.
Yeah, to be continued next week. And it's got one of those great part one endings.
Yeah.
Where, they say something and then there's like an awkward silence for like 3 or 4 seconds before everybody, oh, okay, it's over. And then you hear the applause from the audience. And then to be continued next week comes up on the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in part 2.
I enjoyed the recap in part 2.
Yeah.
Because it used there's like a generic voiceover guy explaining what happened. And then it was using like freeze frames, right?
Right. It was kind of crudely put together.
Yeah.
Last week on Diff'rent Strokes.
Right.
And
And then basically he said all the stuff we just said.
Yeah, exactly. So, part 2 is a little, I don't know, I would almost describe it as a little anticlimactic in the sense that they exposed Jethro Simpson pretty quickly,
Yeah.
I'd say.
After, no one seemed suspicious of him except for Willis. Like, at all.
Yeah, they take a lot of it at face value.
Like, even the lawyer.
Yeah.
It's like, well, if their dad wrote that letter. Like, I mean, Mr. Drummond does ask Willis, does that look like your dad's handwriting? They're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's about it. And even the usually savvy Mrs. Garrett.
Right.
She's just excited.
She's as street smart as anybody from Harlem.
Exactly.
Mr. Drummond's lawyer, I was not very impressed with him.
No.
Talk about a stuffed shirt.
And he only charges $100 an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, back then.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a lot back then for a lawyer. That seems like not a lot for a lawyer.
It doesn't, and you think that someone as rich as Mr. Drummond would have more of his guard up about possible frauds and schemes.
Yeah.
Now he does say he's got to investigate this, and he's not 100%. He's going to do some due diligence on it, and he does it, and eventually it kind of hits him when the kids talk with Jethro and realize he doesn't know anything about them, and that's when kind of the light bulb clicks. And once Mr. Drummond gets enough like specific clues that he can actually like track him down and look into his background and find out that, all this, his claims of being in Brazil and all this adventuring and all this big talk, that it was all made up.
Now maybe we could give Mr. Drummond some credit. Say maybe he's playing a little bit of a slow game and taking in all of this.
Yeah.
But then later, at some point, he basically gives up.
Yeah.
He's like, well, I think I'm just going to have to give.
But he phrases that in an interesting way, though. He sort of holds the door open that he might be able to keep fighting. Well, I should mention here, he says specifically that he doesn't want to put the boys through a protracted custody battle.
Yeah.
His lawyers told him that it might take a while and it might take a lot of money, and he's not worried about the money. He's worried about putting the boys through this agonizing custody battle. So he kind of makes it sound like the best thing to do would be to back off a little bit, but it's a little weird. You'd think if he has any doubts about the legitimacy of things that he should be fighting for them, regardless of it, that ultimately that would be the better thing. I like to think that he's playing more of a long game. He's just kind of biding his time because Mr. Drummond was always my favorite character on the show. And I don't like to think of him being, anything less than brilliant. So I think, he was kind of, just keeping it cool for a while. Okay. And eventually his strategy, he lucked out because Jethro exposed himself pretty quickly.
Now, and there are plenty of clues along the way that Jethro is not what he seemed. Now, it might be because we know, but I think, first of all, he says he was in Brazil, and then he starts speaking Spanish. Everyone knows they speak Portuguese in Brazil.
Yes.
And then, when Mr. Drummond responds to him with more Spanish, he doesn't know what he's saying.
Right. He says one simple phrase, and then when, Mr. Drummond responds, like, oh, you speak Spanish? Oh, a little bit,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I mainly had my servants do that or something.
Right, and then later he says something weird to Kimberly, who's clearly taking Spanish at school, and she gives him a weird look. But it's more just like, oh, this guy's weird. Yeah,
eccentric.
Yeah.
He's like a lovable eccentric instead of like a chiseler.
Right, and then he confuses Willis and Arnold, but they haven't met him, so I could see that.
Right.
Although then he's kind of lets them tell, like he's like, oh, you look just like and Arnold's like, Mama?
Yeah.
And I mean, that should be a hint that he doesn't know. He's supposedly great friends with their parents, not just their cousin, but he's great friends. And then he clearly doesn't remember anything from their neighborhood, and he blames that on jungle fever, which I assume he meant a fever, not Spike Lee's jungle fever.
Right. He blames it on the movie Jungle Fever.
Right, the movie.
Yeah,
the song specifically.
Everything is like Bed-Stuy to him. He can't distinguish any neighborhood from another one. So now Whitman Mayo is very entertaining in this. Yeah. But he buckles pretty quickly once they expose him, and he backs down. That's one thing that's kind of interesting. He doesn't like once he realizes he's busted. He doesn't really stick with it. He's just like he just kind of like throws himself at their mercy, and the boys recommend that the dad doesn't press charges and everything. So
of course he also says, I didn't mean to hurt anyone.
Yeah.
Like. At the very least, you were going to steal $97,000 from some children.
Right. In addition to, interfering with their living situation.
Right. Which he chose to do. Like, I mean, he chose to try to get the money, but then when he saw the living arrangement, he kept with it. Yeah. He didn't go, oh, this isn't going to work out.
Yeah.
Now, he'd already invested in, I guess, a plane ticket, and maybe he had his Panama suit.
Yeah.
He's wearing a white Panama suit and a hat.
And he looks great in it.
He does, yeah. But he probably had to buy that unless he just had it around the junk shop for other cons he's run. And there was something at the scene with Stymie that he owed him money or something.
Yeah,
I was very confused. It was like Stymie was going to come take the junk back or something.
Yeah, he was threatening to repossess the junk or something.
Right.
So I don't know exactly what was going on there, but before we get on too much more on the overall different strokes and everything, I want to mention a little bit of trivia that I was not able to verify.
Okay.
But I did read on the internet, and of course, on the internet, but that originally the episode was intended for Red Fox. That Red Fox was going to play this, and this was going to be like a way to sort of his return back to NBC because he had been on Sanford and Son for years.
Right.
Got contract disputes. ABC lured him away. He did a variety show, and after like a year or two after this, he did come back with Sanford. Yeah. Playing the same character, but obviously he's not in this episode. So, according to the information I read, the episode was kind of hastily rewritten to include Whitman Mayo, and according to this report, the original description for the TV guide actually said that Red Fox was the guest star of the episode. Unfortunately, while we've drawn on my TV guide collection, I do have some from this approximate era. I was not able to locate the one that would have proven this, because I'm very curious. I'm a little skeptical of this.
Would he have still been playing Jethro Simpson, do you think?
I don't think he would have been playing Fred Sanford.
No, because Fred Sanford, as many faults as he had, he wasn't a con man, was he?
No.
I mean, I don't think he would have done this.
He was more like the guys hanging around him were con men.
Right.
But it seems a little too coincidental that Whitman Mayo would be stepping into this part of a junk man.
Yeah. Like, I thought it was, Whitman Mayo's part of that Norman Lear world, too. And
yeah.
Kind of like, Conrad Bain and Charlotte Ray. And they're just like, let's get him. I mean, it was weird that he was a junk man, but there was a plot reason for that.
Right.
For him to find this will stuffed in a mattress.
Right. Well, I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah.
I maybe have to investigate this.
We might have to
more.
get the crack research team involved.
Yes, we might have to take a look at this. But no, the timeline would be right, except for I just don't believe that there would be that last minute that TV Guide would actually have the wrong description and that it would be announced as a Red Fox episode. And that part seems a little weird to me, but I think this would be about the time that Red Fox, in theory, would have been free to do it. So who knows? A tantalizing glimpse of what might have been if Red Fox had played this. Yeah. There definitely would have been more edge, even though Fred Sanford wasn't necessarily. He was a schemer.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if he necessarily would have gone this far, this much effort, but Whitman Mayo was a little bit more laid back. But it would have been fun to see Red Fox doing this too. But
I think that in a way, I mean, the Whitman Mayo part of it, like the contrast between this character and Grady, who seems like a pretty, like you said, laid back, but also a decent guy. Yeah. And here he's not. The performance isn't that different, but it's just enough different. Yeah. That, like, when he gets the idea and stuff, there's a little bit of malice in what he's doing. Yeah, in his behavior, and something about it being in that persona, in the persona we're used to seeing in a different way, it makes that work. I think it makes it more malevolent in a way. For sure. Yeah. He's definitely entertaining in the role. The role is kind of, very basic thing, and his schemes and the way he gets kind of tripped up on him. It's pretty basic stuff, but he was good. It was fun seeing him in this. Yeah, I mean, even when he gets tripped up early, he's fairly quick on his feet. Right. Coming up with some excuse to fill in. Yeah, it's not as you alluded to earlier. It's clearly not his first con. Right. Would you like to talk about the emotional content of this episode? Because it does. It has some emotional content. It does end. It definitely has an emotional focus to it. Yeah. Like, for the most part, I bought the emotional content. The one time I didn't, there was early, like when Arnold and Willis were talking about what they're going to call Mr. Drummond once he's adopted them. And right now they call him Mr. D, and that doesn't seem right, but they don't want to call him Papa because that's what they call their dad. Arnold suggests Phil. Willis puts a kibosh on that. That's not appropriate. Yeah. So they just settle on Dad, and then they tell him about that, and he gets very weepy. Yeah. Like, that was like not Conrad Bain's finest moment. You know what? I kind of bought that. I mean, he wasn't like bawling. I mean, he was clearly taken aback by it, but in a good way. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I'd agree with that. I was actually surprised by how I thought it would be a little bit more over the top. Okay. I guess I'd have to watch that again. Yeah. But I'm a big Conrad Bain fan, so clearly you are. It's hard for me to be objective about that. Right. And of course, like, so he's overjoyed, and they say they're going to keep their Jackson last name. Which I thought by the end of the series that might have changed actually, but I don't know. I'm not so sure about that. But for now they're keeping the Jackson. It's like, I insist on that, So he's not arguing with that. And then at the end of the episode, when they have the big conclusion, right? Arnold says something like, "You got that right, Mr. Drummond." Was like, "No, Arnold, you said it all wrong." Like, I did. Oh, and actually, he realized he's like, "Oh, you got that right, Dad." Dad. Yeah. And then they have it. Yeah, that's nice. I like that. Yeah, it was good. Yeah. So they bring that home. And definitely when there's the concern that everything's going to fall apart. I think I was buying everyone, and that's genuine. Even there's a point. I guess it's the night before, so it's before Jethro shows up, and like Arnold's like sitting on his bed, like staring off into space. Yes. Like that was good. Like you could tell Gary Coleman was emoting something there without doing a lot.
Right.
And seemed to be like the whole episode. Like I was just getting more of that. Like you just think of funny Arnold, like that's the memory of him. But he was doing good work in that too. The more serious parts of that.
Yes.
And of course, Charlotte Rae is. And
yeah, she's doing her thing.
Yeah, she's doing her thing.
She's making her jokes about looking for a man.
Yeah. Right.
You know.
And she even she and Whitman Mayo have a little when they first meet. It's a little flirty there.
Yes,
it's pretty awesome.
He asks if she's what
his daughter.
His daughter.
Yeah.
Oh, because I thought it was some sexy. I don't know. I'm talking like Bill Cosby all of a sudden. I'll just stop now. But he's trying to be charmer, and let's just say he's no Phil Silvers as a flatterer. I mean, it's incredibly transparent, but Mrs. Garrett is glad to go along with it.
Yeah, and bats her eyelashes. Yeah.
No, I'm not the young daughter. I'm the young housekeeper.
Yeah. And now you're doing Paul Lynde.
Yeah. Oh, the sadder thing is I thought it was Charles Nelson Riley. But and she don't they come back from the courtroom and she makes a comment about the court clerk asking for her phone number, and she does a little twinkle and twirl with that one too.
Right. And when they're originally going to go, someone compliments on her on her dress, and she's like, "I only wear this on special occasions. The last time I wore it was when I got divorced or something."
Yeah. Well, when was the last time you wore it? When I got divorced. So that's the adoption. So you were a fan of this episode?
Overall, I liked it. Yeah. And we haven't talked about the comedy of it. How does the Diff'rent Strokes brand of comedy hold up?
Well, it's interesting because I didn't think there was. It seemed like a lot of the comedy in this one was. I mean, you always get the little scenes between Arnold and Willis, where Arnold's saying sassy things, but a lot of the comedy was carried by Whitman Mayo and his character, the Jethro Simpson, and it didn't seem like there was a lot of. It seemed like there was some more of this plot. To me, it wasn't as ha-ha as some of the other episodes. But one thing I do want to say, you were talking about Arnold and Gary Coleman, is I've been watching some of the early episodes, because I watched this one on DVD. I just happened to have acquired a copy of the DVD of these first two seasons, yes. And I think there's a huge difference between Gary Coleman in this season and Gary Coleman in those early episodes. Yeah. At the beginning of the show, everything he says, he's punctuating it with like a little mug, like he smiles at the end of every line. Which kind of like it's kind of like Natalie in Facts of Life, where he's doing jokes and stuff, whereas he seems to be like 10 times better as a performer in this one. He's excellent and he's doing the lines, but he's not doing those little smiles afterwards. He's doing it like he's just saying funny things or whatever, but not like he's trying to get laughs. Right. I mean, you can definitely see it if you take a look at it. So I was actually much more impressed with his performance in this, only like a year after the show started. Now, granted, there might be a big curve at that age, but you can see right from the beginning of the show how charismatic he is, and it's easy to see how he became such a big star. But in this one, it seems like he's already so much more polished as a performer, even as a child actor, than he was at the beginning. Yeah, that's interesting, because I was impressed by him, and I started, of course we know that he was older than he was playing, but he really I looked all this up. I looked up, luckily, the birth dates of all the characters were online and stuff, and he's only playing 2 years older than he is, which means I think so. Like the character is 8 or 9, so he's like 10 or 11 at that point. So that's not a huge difference. Like I thought it was more, but he, in a way, not just his performance, but the writing, I think, made his character seem older than 8 or 9. He just knew a lot of stuff that you're like, well, why does he have a reference to that? Whereas I think like Willis maybe seems more his age. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, so I think it's a combination of the performance, and since he's the character that gets a lot of jokes, he's being written precocious. Yeah, that's no surprise, and he does have that reflective scene, as you mentioned. Yeah, I like when he says funny stuff, that Conrad Bain or Philip seems to like often enjoy what he's saying. Yeah, he gets a kick. Yeah. So that makes it's not just a joke for our sake, but it's trying to imply that the character is being funny. Right. It's not just funny for the audience's sake. I would say go back and watch some of those first handful of episodes, and I think you'll see a big difference. You'll know instantly what I see. If it's probably been a while since you've seen like the real early Gary Coleman, but it's a big difference. And by the way, let me just say the other thing is it kind of feels weird for me to call him Philip. Like
Right.
I just watched the show and I feel like I should call him Mr. Drummond. I don't feel worthy to call him Phil or Philip.
I couldn't decide what to.
But
maybe we should just call him Dad.
For me, well, I don't know if I'm ready to go that far. But just my personal preference is Mr. Drummond.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting episode. Another thing they did, they were going to run away in this episode.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't mention that when I was going to go over the plot because they'd rather, if they can't live with Mr. Drummond, they'd rather just run away again.
Right.
Now it seems to me like, again, watching these early episodes, they seem to do this every episode. Like they threaten to run away. There'd be some misunderstanding. And I thought maybe by the second season they would have gotten this out of their systems and they'd be established like, okay, you can stay here. Mr. Drummond still likes you, and this is where you're meant to be. But now in this case, there was kind of external forces. But looking through the episode descriptions, there was another episode, like I think even the next season, where something again happens where there's some kind of misunderstanding, and the first thing they do is they threaten to run away to go back to Harlem. So it took them a long time to be secure with their place in the household, even if they are calling him Dad.
And in this case, like Willis said something that definitely suggested that they would be living on the street.
Yeah, he's one of the
very dire.
Yeah,
thing. Like Arnold wanted to take something dumb with him that you wouldn't need on the street, or I forget what the.
Yeah. Now give him credit because that takes a lot of guts to give up that cushy penthouse.
Yeah.
Which is, I believe it's in this episode that Arnold says they have 4 Johns.
They have 4 Johns, and yet they have to share one with Kimberly.
I was wondering about that. Isn't that bizarre?
Yeah.
Because not only that, Kimberly has no access point to that bathroom. She's got to go through their bedroom to get in there. Because every other time we see her, she's coming into their room, like from the outside. She never comes in through the
from the outside.
Yeah, from the outside.
Because this one she came from the bathroom.
Right. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like her room. So presumably her room has no access point to the bathroom.
Right. I didn't think about it. I just assumed it was like a 2-door bathroom.
I did too, but I don't remember her ever like entering just the room from any other way. Like, why would she not just enter more through the bathroom?
Well,
like knock on the door.
I think that's. I don't know if you can find an in-story reason.
So she's going all the way around the house.
Yeah, right.
Through the maid's quarters. Through Mr. Drummond's bedroom.
Right.
Through the rumpus room.
Yeah.
Through the indoor swimming pool. Through the gymnasium. Through the terrarium. And then finally, knock, knock, knock. That seems a little inconvenient to me.
Yeah.
So she would.
So on another episode, she knocks on their bedroom so that she can get into the bathroom.
Well, or she just shows. Well, no, I don't think they make an issue of her. Like, hey, can I use the bathroom? Okay. It's just like whenever she wants to talk to them, she comes up through that main door where Mr. Drummond comes in.
Yeah.
So, which always makes me wonder. Well, like, why doesn't?
Why don't she just go through the bathroom?
Right, or because I never would have thought that she shared a bathroom with them. I assumed that she had her own bathroom.
Yeah. Where is the comic book breakdown of this penthouse?
Yeah, like the open view with
the cutaway view of their penthouse. Because when I was a kid, I remember, we don't see it in this episode, but in the kitchen, there's like a spiral staircase in the kitchen, and like I remember always wondering where that went.
Right.
And also just like with sitcoms in general, and probably starting with Diff'rent Strokes, but like it dawned on me, like every sitcom, if it has a house, there's always a staircase. Even if no one ever uses it.
Right.
There's always a staircase. I'm like, oh, what's that about? And I guess it's all theater-based kind of thing. But I still want to know where that spiral staircase went. Because I don't think they ever used it.
We might have another assignment for our crack research team. They're going to be busy after this episode.
In the cutaway.
Yeah, but there's definitely legitimate questions about the household.
Yeah. Now, maybe they have 4 Johns, but only one, or maybe like only 2 full bathrooms.
Could be. So like Kimberly's got a half bathroom, but has to go in there to use the shower.
Right, yeah.
Or something, okay.
Yeah, I'm going to assume there's a master bathroom.
Yeah, there's got to be some in the main level.
Yeah. Mrs. Garrett, she just uses the kitchen sink. I don't know. Not to relieve herself, but for
to freshen up.
Freshen up, yeah.
For gentlemen callers.
Right.
Well, it's a mystery of Diff'rent Strokes.
Yeah.
That people have neglected with their emphasis on the very special episodes. They've ignored the commonplace problems that are staring everybody right in the face here. So
that's right.
We'll have to look into that. But I don't remember how we got onto that. But they were living in a nice place. They're willing to give up, run away. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Arnold. We also learned that he's a fan of food.
He is.
Mrs. Garrett is cooking some of his favorite things. This is when they're planning on to run away. He wants to wait till after dinner. And Willis says, "What?" food.
Yeah, she's making one of his favorite things.
And he takes a tuna sandwich.
Yeah, a tuna.
And he collects sandwiches.
Yes. Well,
this is what Mrs. Garrett says.
I guess it's kind of like that thing where if you grow up in the Depression, you never take food for granted, and maybe as willing as they are to go back to the streets, Arnold's going to at least grab a tuna sandwich on his way out.
Yeah.
And Mrs. Garrett's always bribing him with like banana splits and sundaes, and
That's
always
right.
kind of treating the whole family that kind of thing. So,
What kind of very special episode is that? Those are not good lessons.
what that he can
That you can bribe a child with food.
well,
More specifically, that a
sometimes-
child thinks they can be bribed with food.
yeah, that's troubling, definitely.
Yeah.
But Mr. Drummond can afford it.
Well, he can certainly afford it, but is it good for the child's health?
He can afford doctors.
No.
He can afford everything. He can afford Haagen-Dazs ice cream. He doesn't even have to get the store brand.
Yeah.
He lets Mrs. Garrett shop wherever,
And yet, he's still a penny pincher.
Well, he's a little thrifty sometimes.
He doesn't want to spend that $100 an hour on a lawyer.
Yeah, that's true. Well, he's a rational man.
Yeah.
He wants to spend that money on his family.
Right. So over the course of 2 episodes, we actually get 3 What You Talking About.
Well, I remember 2 of them.
2 from Arnold,
Okay.
and 1 Jethro says it.
Yeah, and he says it without even knowing that it's Arnold's catchphrase.
Right,
And that's actually one clue, one reason that they think he is part of the family.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it actually, he says it to Mr. Drummond, right?
Yeah.
I'm actually thinking about that. The episode is worth it, folks, just to see Whitman Mayo saying, "What you talking about?" Yeah, we should have mentioned that earlier, but yeah.
Right.
So you do get the "What you talking about," which
And of
is
course
clearly a catchphrase.
Yeah, and it's not just the that he's saying; it's the way he says it, and like his face. Gary Coleman's face changes.
Yeah.
Kind of like leans forward.
Yeah, I think he even improved on that over the show's run. So I was going to ask you now, did you watch the show as a kid? Because I definitely did.
I definitely did, and I don't know if I always watched it when it was on, but I think I did for the most part. And then I remember watching lots of reruns, and I frankly was still watching in those last kind of dismal years.
Yeah, it was kind of sad then, but
Yeah.
I was definitely watching a lot of it. I remember and I looked it up, and they were showing reruns in 1983 and 1984, like in that time frame on NBC.
Oh, it was another
weekdays.
one of those, yeah.
Yeah, like kind of like some of these other shows, like Facts of Life, and so they had Diff'rent Strokes reruns on. I know it was heavy in syndication,
Yeah.
but I think this is probably where I watched a lot of it. Like it was on weekday mornings, maybe in the summer or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
I remember it being on. I don't necessarily remember, watching it, having it be a big primetime event to sit around and see what Mr. Drummond's talking about this week. But
Right.
I enjoyed it as a kid,
Yeah.
and it's a good show. Now, would you say like this is a good for somebody that hasn't watched Diff'rent Strokes in a while? What would you say about how does it kind of epitomize your picture of the show? I think it does a pretty good job of it.
Yeah,
actually.
it's got a lot of the right elements. I think I was kind of hoping to see that Mr. Drummond would get to be funny a little bit. And that didn't really happen. Just based on like you talking about him being in Maude and reading about him being in Maude.
Yeah.
In TV, the book, they talked about that, and so I was hoping, and he really didn't get to do anything.
I think he's definitely more of a straight man and more of
Yeah.
a reactor, and kind of like indulging the kids and stuff. Which,
But he's a good presence. I like him.
yeah,
And yeah, I think there are probably other episodes that are just as good. Pick up on, but and I think to start, I would say either season 1 or season 2, not just because it's early, but because you get Mrs. Garrett.
Mm-hmm.
But she leaves like midway through, or maybe even a quarter way through season 2.
2, yeah, pretty early.
And then you don't want to go too far because once they get a little too old, especially Gary Coleman, it's not quite as enjoyable.
Yeah, and we haven't mentioned Arnold's friend Dudley,
No.
who was in the Bicycle Man episode, but was a fixture of the show for a while. And
Yeah.
I guess this wasn't really missing any of the other memorable supporting characters. I mean, there was the Gooch,
Who never showed
the
up, right?
oft-discussed bully,
Yeah.
who picked on Arnold. I don't think they ever actually showed him,
I
but
don't think so. And
Gooch is not in this
somewhere,
one.
as we learned in a TV guide game, Andrew Dice Clay was on for a while.
yeah, he was like a semi-regular too. Later,
Yeah.
several years later, I think. So yeah, they got older. It happens with shows with cute kids, and
Yeah.
especially somebody doing the kind of role Gary Coleman. I mean, that had a shelf life,
Yeah.
and just kind of weird to think of Gary Coleman like a younger kid being the designated cute kid on a show with Gary Coleman. That just is bizarre.
Yeah.
And that's why the Danny Cooksey experiment didn't really work out when they brought in the redhead Sam.
The Danny Cooksey experiment. That's
good band name.
Yep, good band. Here's an interesting. One of my friends, but listener to the show, Evan told me he's been watching a lot of Diff'rent Strokes with his 6-year-old daughter. It's her favorite show, but they're watching it on demand, and they're not in order on demand.
Oh,
so they get them all out.
Oh, really? So all
kind
over
of
the
like
place.
a random, yeah.
Wow.
But it's good to hear that it still appeals to 6-year-olds.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that. I mean,
yeah.
Well, I guess when I was 6 years old, I was probably watching it, but yeah, you know, the Gary Coleman character, it's not. I mean, they got definitely some adult themes, but
they do.
It's not exactly, the most sophisticated repartee on the show.
No.
I mean, a lot of it is like the kids say something sassy,
yeah.
and maybe every now and then, Mr. Drummond will have a bemused reaction to it that is sort of, genial and
right.
and funny, but the kids get the real funny lines, and Mrs. Garrett, of course, is sassy.
Yeah.
I've been a little surprised by. Like I think I used the word bubbly, but Kimberly, how just it's especially sad seeing what happened to her. Just how enthusiastic she is, and how right away, it's almost like right from the beginning she got along with the kids very well and was very accepting of them.
Yeah.
And everything. Which I thought there was more of. I seem to remember more arguing between more typical brother sister bickering.
Yeah.
But it's not really so much like kind of the sniping like in a show like Family Ties even or something like that, where the kids are always making sarcastic comments about each other. It seemed like they were all kind of all on the same side, and this one, all going through their very special issues and everything.
Yeah, and I just thought of this, but this episode is a really good example of that Willis and Arnold having this special bond that's different than everyone else.
Right.
Not just sharing a room, but that I think it just comes across that they have these moments together where they're deciding things for their life, even though it's running away or whatever, but. And they bicker a little bit, but you can tell there's a connection there.
Yeah, and there's a great chemistry between those two. That was excellent job of when they cast the show, and people don't. Todd Bridges is kind of supposed to be like the more brittle one, the more reserved with his guard up, and he is that. So he doesn't get all the flashy lines, but he's fine in this show.
Yeah,
nothing wrong with Todd Bridges' performance.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do you think Willis and Arnold are actually fans of Northwestern, Princeton, and Yale? These are the pennants they have over their bed.
That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
There's another one I couldn't see.
Yeah.
I assume it was Harvard or some other, highfalutin school.
Johns Hopkins.
Northwestern isn't Ivy League, but
it's not. But it's definitely got a reputation.
Yeah.
For academic.
Right.
It's definitely more of an academic type school.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I don't know what the deal is with that.
Now I know if it were like 1930s football, college football, Princeton and Yale.
Yeah.
It would be people in fur coats and funny hats watching Princeton and Yale. But
guys with leather helmets knocking each other silly and laughing about it.
Right. I mean, I'm going to assume Mr. Drummond went to one of those schools.
Well, I know from an episode I was just watching, he went to Digby Prep.
Oh.
And he was actually pushing the boys early on to attend Digby Prep. But I don't remember him talking about it specifically his college background. But yeah, I guess I would think that it's more like they moved into a generic. Somebody set up the bedroom with some generic idea of what a boy would like. Like, okay, we'll put pennants up here. We'll put, and they somebody went into like a J.C. Penney's catalog and picked out like a bedspread set, and maybe a set of pennants for the wall and like an airplane model.
Right. Maybe they went through Sears, and much like my parents trying to get us football stuff, they had to settle with what was still in stock. Yeah,
everything was.
Yeah.
Like Notre Dame was out of the.
Right.
Because they're living in New York. New York's not a big college football town. To be fair.
No.
So yeah.
And I'm assuming football. I mean, it could be basketball or baseball or just they're
chess.
They're a fan of academics.
That could be. Yeah. I don't remember them discussing that on the wall.
No.
Or the pennants they have in their room. That's interesting though. That's a detail that I don't think I missed, or that I think I missed. I was too busy worrying about the bathroom.
Right.
If they had a pennant over the bathroom,
right.
I would have been all over that. But this one I missed. I missed this set of pennant. So I don't know. Now, I guess we did mention. Did we mention early on or make explicit that Facts of Life was actually spun off from Diff'rent Strokes?
I don't know if we did here. We certainly did in the Facts of Life.
Right. So just to mention that that's basically why Mrs. Garrett, leaves the show.
Right. Kimberly supposedly attends that school. Like, that was how they made the connection. Which I think that story actually happens in season 1.
Where she goes off to the private school.
Or the first time they show it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll have to research that.
But then, of course, I think maybe she showed up on the Facts of Life once or something.
Yeah.
Arnold shows up sometimes.
Yes. Yeah, Arnold was all over the place.
Yeah.
And actually, Gary Coleman was all over the place.
Right.
I mean, we should touch on this. The guy was huge back in the day. He was a franchise. He had TV movies. Mm-hmm. He had his own cartoon show.
Yep.
And he was a frequent star in the cover of Bananas magazine or whatever. He was a teen idol for that under 10 set.
He's probably showing up on late night shows and Bob Hope specials.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He was like a really big deal. And some of that stuff has been around. I definitely would want to see some of the. I'd love to see some more of the cartoon show. I think that's been on in reruns over the years, and the TV movies pop up every now and then.
How many? I can think of 2 of those off.
The Kid with a Broken Halo.
Yeah.
The kid with the
200 IQ.
200 IQ.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are the only 2 I remember. He had to have been in one or 2 more, I think.
Right.
He and Robert Guillaume were quite the team.
Yeah. Was Robert Guillaume in the Kid with the $200 or 200?
Yeah, I think he was like his teacher, academic advisor, or something in that.
I know Willie Ames and Lori Loughlin were in it.
Man.
Willie Ames was his roommate. And Lori Loughlin, he kind of fell for her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, she was a little old for him.
True that.
And on the cartoon, he was an angel. That was sort of a spin-off or a variation of the Kid with the Broken Halo.
Yeah. So, like we've said, NBC wasn't the best spin, but Gary Coleman was I don't know. In some ways, was he the face of the network at the time? Probably. I mean, you had Bob Hope doing the annual specials. You had Johnny Carson and Late Night, but Gary Coleman, he was big. He was definitely a crossover star. Yeah. More successful probably than the other spinoff of Diff'rent Strokes. Do you remember the other?
Silver Spoons?
Is
that an actual spinoff or?
I don't think that's an official spinoff of.
But there was crossover.
Yeah, yes, I believe there's crossover. I'm thinking of Hello Larry.
Oh yeah.
The McLean-Stevenson vehicle that they really tried to push that hard, and I think they actually introduced it like as a backdoor pilot on Diff'rent Strokes.
Because
and then actually,
Mr. Drummond owns the radio station.
Yeah,
Larry works at.
He bought. Yeah, yes.
But they're pals too.
Yeah, exactly.
I saw that, and there are multiple episodes where either Larry's family visits or they visit Larry's family.
Yeah, they tried hard to get Hello Larry over. It just didn't work. Not even Diff'rent Strokes could put that one over. Poor McLean-Stevenson. So, Hello Larry, not part of the enduring legacy, but Facts of Life.
Yeah.
Geez, I guess that was on almost longer than Diff'rent Strokes. Even, which is amazing. But Diff'rent Strokes was almost spanned the whole 80s, really.
It's kind of surprising.
Yeah.
I was surprised, looking at 8 seasons. It just seemed like.
Yeah, I think it's one of those shows too where I think a lot of people that grew up watching TV in this period will remember it. Yeah. And even if they didn't watch a lot of it, I'm sure they'll remember certain episodes or the moments and everything. I think it's one of those things that's disproportionately popular. It seems to come and go in syndication. I'm not sure it's ever been a big hit. It doesn't seem to last very long when stations do start the reruns now. Mm-hmm. But man, it seems like everybody was aware of it back in the day, and it seems like it's still pretty prominent in pop culture.
And it is on one of the Stars Encore channels. I think they call it Stars Encore Black.
Yeah, that's
or Stars Black or whatever.
Nothing subtle about that, is there?
No. And if you have that, then it should be on demand and on their streaming app. That's where I watched it.
So the adoption, I think, is a decent episode, a good sample of Diff'rent Strokes, and
right.
I had a good time watching. I'm going to keep kind of revisiting these early years of the show. There's a lot of interesting episodes, and I know there's, as we talked about, there's many more to come. Many more of the very special ones really get cranking. But this is kind of an example of just, okay, this is Diff'rent Strokes as a sitcom before they really started beating the drum heavy on those issues.
Yeah.
Because while race is talked about in here, it's not really in your face. Although, let's be honest, the whole issue of white people trying to do the right thing and the sort of faint condescension about that, that's always present throughout the whole series, but
Yeah.
they meant well. This episode brought to you by TransAllied Incorporated, the amiable, benevolent, middle-aged white man of corporations. Our CEO adopted 2 black kids. This episode also brought to you by Simpsons Limited South America. Copper, chinchilla, coffee, auto parts, and lies. This episode also brought to you by Mrs. G's Kitchen, now serving ironed avocados. Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network Shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/battleofthenetworkshows.
Well, you sure came at the right time, Mr. Simpson, didn't he, boys?
Yeah, tomorrow Mr. Drummond's gonna adopt us.
What you talking about, Arnold?